Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Streaming Media Connect. I am your moderator and master or monster of ceremonies, Evan Shapiro, for this week at Streaming Media Connect. Before we get started with this great panel, Game Changer 5G and live sports streaming, a little bit of busy work. The first person who answers the name of the song and the act or the musician who was just playing as we walked up on stage will get a $50 gift certificate from Amazon, courtesy of Streaming Media Connect. But you have to be here at the end of the panel to win. You have to be here to win it. Just quickly, in the chat, you'll see links from Steve, our producer, and our editor for bios of the panelists. You also see a link to the YouTube page where all of the content from this week will appear next week. Make sure that you pay attention to that chat during the panel. But if you have questions for the panelists or the moderator, please put them in the Q&A. If you don't put your Qs in the Q&A, we can't give you our As. And once again, all the content from this week, the next 3 days is going to be on our YouTube page next week. Look for the link in the chat. And also, this is our 14th Streaming Media Connect, if you can believe it or not. It doesn't look a day over 12. But we will be coming back in February, the 25th through the 27th, for our 15th Streaming Media Connect. So mark your calendars and join us then. And now, without further ado, welcome to our panel, Game Changer 5G Live Sports Streaming. And I'm going to bring to the stage our great moderator, from videoRx, Robert Reinhardt. Robert, take it away.
Thank you very much. Oh, my camera just got messed up with the coming back on after being muted off. Anyway, thank you very much for that introduction and welcome. I'm really happy to be back at Stream Media Connect. As Evan just said, I'm Robert Reinhardt, and I've been part of Streaming Media for a long time here. I'm just going to read the session description real quick because it's going to give us the context, and hopefully everyone's at the right place where they want to be. 5G's capacity to connect vastly more devices at low latency than previous protocols has long been heralded as a home run for in-arena live sports streaming experiences, though its predicted impact on contribution, distribution, play-by-play prop betting, and other rapid-fire interactions has not always been readily apparent. Has the promised 5G future finally arrived for live streaming delivery? Where is 5G making a splash? Where are the untapped opportunities? How can stakeholders strategically leverage them? And where do the roadblocks remain? We're going to try to get to as many of those questions as we can in this session. And again, thank you for joining us. I'm going to start by introducing our panel. I'm lucky to know all of these people. I've been on either previous sessions with them or worked with them in days of yore over the years. I'm going to start with Tim Brady. Tim, if you don't mind, there we go. Tim Brady is the SVP of Strategic Solutions from Next League. Tim, why don't you just give us a quick introduction? Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Robert. Next League is a company that is focused on technology and strategy for the sports industry. So this is a very logical conversation for us to have with any of our clients. Previous to that, I've worked at the NFL, Fox Sports, and Sony Pictures Interactive. So all of which are very topical for this. Thanks for the intro.
Thank you for that. Next, we're going to have Kenny Bunch. And again, we have a Brady right before a Bunch. We just realized there was a little pun there with the Brady Bunch, but Kenny Bunch, founder of Dreamsocket. Kenny, please give us an introduction.
Yeah, I mean, I wear a lot of hats. I've been programming since I was 8 years old, running a company for like 19 years, been in the space since 2000. Worked with all the media companies here in the States, worked with a lot of the leagues, just been inundated with it for the past 20 odd years. So
thank you for that. And now let's move on to Darcy. Darcy. My goodness, my apologies, Darcy. Darcy Lorincz, Chairman and President of WTFast. Darcy, give us a quick introduction. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. I've been in this space for 32 years now. So it's from early days of building networks to content delivery to production and streaming and gaming and, a long line of things that always plugged into this thing we're going to talk about today, which is, bandwidth and what's available at the first, last, and middle mile. So I look forward to the conversation and bringing some of that history to bear and answering questions with the rest of the panel. Look forward to it.
Thank you for that. You guys were great. That was perfect. I love that introduction, and hopefully we'll see a little bit more about your experience in this arena of 5G and live sports as we get into this. Well, let's just start with that first question. Has the promised 5G future finally arrived for live streaming delivery? I mean, that's a pretty broad statement. And what is this promised future that we hear about? Anyone want to take a stab at that, or I'll leave it open? I'm going to pick on you, Tim. I know you have a comment.
I do. I wasn't sure where to start. So I would say that from a technology standpoint, it is here, and it has been here for several years. It's the business that might be holding it up. The logistics of using it with all the other mature operations, advertising, analytics, et cetera, pass through. With all of that, the technology isn't the hurdle. It's the business case and business applications that to me is the only thing holding up.
I'll jump in. The spectrum, as Tim said, it's been around for a while. So certainly the technology is not new. We were using spectrum, a decade ago before there was even commercial use. I think, as you said, Tim, it's probably commercialization more than business use. The carriers and operators still don't know what they have. They're just, putting it out there on these devices, but they're not using slicing or any of the, other things that you could do inside this technology. So I think there's a commercialization that needs to happen still. But, the technology is useful, and you can get private networks that use it. So it's definitely there, and how you use it and what the commercial operator lets you do with it are still a little bit of separation.
Kenny, do you have anything to add to our intro here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, like, at a high level, like if you look at it from like top level from the end user's perspective, I would say it's here. And it's very kind of easy to see in the sense that, like, before, if you were consuming media, you had to watch it out of your home. But now, if you're like traveling or wherever you may be, like you have your device on you, you can watch content anywhere, anytime. I mean, I'm constantly reminded of it because, like with the clients who work with, I mean, I could be working on a live streaming event and then connected to my phone, like debugging things in a car while I'm driving if I need be. And that's a reality that exists today that didn't, years before. So I would say that, yeah, I mean, from an end user's perspective, I mean, you're able to do things that you were never able to do before. So like that's the promise of like 5G. It's just, mobile connectivity.
Well, let's move on to the next question. Where is 5G making a splash? That we have a multi-fragment. There's multiple parts to the next question, but the first part of it is, where is it making a splash? Does anyone want to sort of jump in on where we actually see 5G making a difference in anyone's experience of something right now?
I'll jump in and say that we're seeing value in dense networks, which for us is a live event stadium. Getting 60,000 plus people in one place at one time is very difficult for the networks, and 5G has allowed us to be still very creative in that situation where otherwise we would have just given up on it.
And how do you see that moving forward? I mean, do you, when it comes to the roadmap in that space you're working at? I mean, do you see it like 2025 bringing us some new opportunities there? I'm sort of migrating into the next question a little bit there, where the untapped opportunities might be, but I'm curious. And again, this is sort of part of that, not just where it's making a splash now, where will it be making a splash, but it's 2025. I mean, we're almost there. We only have a little bit of more than a month left here in 2024. Are we going to see some big changes in 2025? And again, just going back to the roadmaps you're working with, Tim.
I would say that my prediction in the space has been a little off. We got active in it in 2019 and did some experiments with Verizon that proved that you can get fast, so you can be very close to real time. You could do it with high bandwidth, and you could do it in a dense network. Some of the promises of 5G, and we were able to do that 4 or 5 years ago. And in it, that took all of the technology hurdle away. The laboratory said that it could be done, and then it became, well, then what do you do with it? And the first thing that comes up for most people is, if I pay all the money that I am paying to go to an event, why am I asking someone to take out their phone and stare at their phone? And so that's just a natural user experience, business decision. Do you want people to do that? Reality is people are going to do it whether you like it or not. So now the question is, if they do pull it out, what is it you want them to do? And I think for the most part, we were mimicking a Jumbotron and essentially bringing your Jumbotron close to you, and you can then control it, make it interactive. But what I think is likely going to happen is the sports wagering companies have invested a tremendous amount in predictive analysis. So where are we in this particular event? What's likely going to happen? Call it the next play, if you will. And that was very useful for gambling. I think it's going to be really useful for, call it the casual fan, to go avid and have that be their Sherpa, their guide in that. So if they know what's supposed to happen next, then they can cheer and boo with everybody else. If they don't know what the play was supposed to do, they're just kind of a delayed on everything going on. So I think once we start leveraging the technology to essentially be a guide for someone who's just a step behind or new to it, then I think it'll open it up. But I haven't heard people asking for it yet. So I know what the application is that could open it up. I'm just not seeing the request for it yet.
There's a couple of areas where it makes a difference. I live in an area where urban meets rural. Across the highway, the rural people didn't have any bandwidth. And now the mobile operator can put bandwidth there, and the whole community gets to see what used to be just relegated to the people who could get DSL or fiber or whatever. I've got fiber to the home, but my neighbors didn't, and now they've got 5G, and it just took didn't take any time. They didn't have to dig up the street and put anything in. They just put a T-Mobile or a AT&T or Verizon device in, and then it also creates ubiquity. 5G is everywhere. My device I take with me is the same technology as when I'm in my home, if I have that kind of 5G connectivity. So it equals the playing field for everybody to consume. And then on contribution, it did the same thing. You have now amateur sports, those lower down things that couldn't afford all the connectivity, muxing together a bunch of lines together to make some meaningful contribution network. All you do is bring out your device and stream from it from anywhere, and it's decent, as long as you're in a serving area. And now if you're not in a serving area, be surprised, especially in the urban areas of the US. And there's other technologies taking care of real remote areas, as we know. We've heard Starlink a million times, but 5G is really the great equalizer for contribution and distribution. Still hasn't fixed latency, I know we're going to talk about, but at least the availability of bandwidth is ubiquitous, in my opinion.
Kenny, you might have something to comment on this, but one of the things that's coming into my head, the more we talk about this, is sort of just where we are with the development of these experiences, is that it might, and I have a 17-year-old daughter. I think all of us know people that are younger if you don't have kids yourselves, but is this just a generational gap too, where we're just waiting for people who were born with devices ready to come to these events, right? Like I take my daughter to a concert, she's there with her phone, right? It is part of that experience, right? Whereas the rest of us, like you said, Tim, I think earlier, we get there and we've paid our money. We just want to enjoy the game. Betting's going to change that for anyone who's interested in betting for sure. But Kenny, I'm going to pick on you again. I mean, you've worked on gamification. Like, is it just a matter of tapping into some of these audiences that just aren't there yet when it comes to getting them into sports more? I mean, we got Taylor Swift, of course. My daughter's watching more football than she ever did, so she probably knows a little bit more about it than I do now. But how do you feel that's having an effect on where we're at with just sort of adoption and people wanting to do it?
No, I mean, I don't think that that's like trying to say that you would be thinking of what they're going to want and then pull them to it. It's I always come from the end user's perspective of like, what are they doing, and then trying to like mimic their behaviors or getting in their mind and trying to understand what they would actually want, and then building that, not trying to think of what I would think that they want, and coming from that perspective. So it's kind of like backwards from that. And so I don't know, like, I mean, I look at it from the, when you talk about sports or whatever, like I come from a very individualistic sport. I have been skateboarding all my life. So like a lot of sports are too slow for me. So when you talk about gamification and everything, it's like, if you go to an event like a baseball event or an NFL event, like somebody who's a rabid fan understands it, knows all the details, can tell you all the stats and everything like that. And if you're gamifying it for them, that's one experience that's completely different than if you were gamifying it for like your daughter or something that doesn't even understand the sport, or even a girlfriend of somebody that was going to an event with her boyfriend who could care less, but is just there, because he wants to and he's dragging her along. So in that respect, like if you, and we're kind of getting off topic of streaming here, but like if you're trying to bring experiences into streaming, then it's like, well, what do you do that like kind of simplifies the sport and introduces it to somebody like that, where it's actually fun and engaging and actually speeds the event up? So in that case, it's like, I mean, it could be literally like, like trying to do predictive play or betting or something like that, where you're asking simple things of like, is this person going to run, or are they going to get like tackled or whatever. And so that way it's there isn't really a hurdle for that person to be involved. And if you're adding those kind of elements in during the event, it kind of makes it actually go faster than if you're just passively watching it and hearing people talk about stats and things like that. So I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of went off of streaming.
Oh no, well, I mean, but streaming, I mean, for me, that's always a backdrop, is the visual component to any of this, right? Live events are live events. I mean, sure, this session is about sports specifically, but it does have an impact. 5G and in-arena experiences are going to change, right? I think as we move forward. And I mean, I know even just with, I mean, again, I don't want to get off on topic on concerts, but I've been to about an equal number of concerts and sporting events this year. But again, just contrasting to my daughter or things that I had in common with her, being able, like, you're not always at a best vantage point, right? So being, I mean, multi-angle has been around since DVDs that were customized for multi-angle. And how many people really use multi-angle in a live event when they have control over it? But again, I don't want to get off on topic on that so much as just this difference of mindset of just sort of an expectation of having an added layer to an experience that 5G is going to facilitate, because hey, I don't have to connect to a special thing or a special app. It's just going to work. Again, we all know, I think, that 5G is here. It's just more getting the audiences on board with how that experience can be augmented by that. Darcy, do you want to chime in on any of that?
Yeah, augmented, you said the keyword, so got me going. I was at the NASCAR race in the final championship 2 days ago. They didn't do this, so NASCAR didn't fix it. 5G did. I was able to have my phone and seeing the overlays of social media. We're fans, right? Whoever you're following, you can follow their social. You can see the chat. You can see what their team's doing. You can listen in if you want on audio, but it was all coordinated. If I went to that track a year ago, it would have been a nightmare. It would have been delayed. I would have been like, I already saw that. What do I care what this person's saying on the chat? It's over. Real time in motorsports is real time. I mean, it's faster than any sport. So you better have some coordination. And I was, pleased with the time synchronization. I didn't feel like I was out of sync on chat. I was able to look at stats, see what you can't see the back corner from where I was. So I want to know what's going on over there. So if you want to take a camera, that had that viewer inside the car. You could do those things, and it was pretty seamless. So I also came from SEMA last week, which is a massive thing in a Las Vegas Convention Center, 140,000 people. You could not have gotten a signal there. And this time, I was actually able to, participate and find out what's going on and look at other sessions and watch a session while I was, walking, 4 miles from one corner to the other or in the tunnel. So I think, this year I noticed it personally, at a live motorsports event and at a conference, that I was able to see these augmented experiences. I was overlaying stats and positions and seeing other camera angles and other things going on at this massive, automotive event. I think, that, and I wouldn't say latency still. So I don't know. I mean that, if it was a millisecond or 10 milliseconds, didn't matter to me because I never was able to do that before. In racing, you care because 100 milliseconds means a lot in racing. So at that track, somebody did something. They rolled probably some 5G capacity out there and connected it around the track and gave everybody a pretty cool experience. And you could watch whichever team you wanted to. And it was good stuff. So that's my personal experience, like the last week. And I think that, it speaks loudly for what 5G is doing for opportunities in sports.
We do actually have some questions from our audience now. Just came in a few minutes ago. Indra's asking, would you provide thoughts on raising awareness for not only users, but also platform/hardware/software providers? With regard to the latter, thoughts on marketing approaches such as bundling. Anyone have anything that could tell Indra on that one?
I'll jump fast. So we, WTFast is the company. We bundle our low latency gaming solution with a carrier's dumb pipes and give you something in the home that makes gaming experiences awesome. The pipe itself, 5G doesn't do that. Hate to pour water on that fire, but 5G by itself solves bandwidth, doesn't solve latency. When you're playing a game, latency matters. So I just said racing, a racing game, but any game. So that ultimately has been, a big change, and the operators are figuring it out. They're solving problems. The phone calls they take in customer service because people think the pipe is crappy. It's not. It's the technology that's layered in that last or first mile that matters. And once they enable that, you have something else that you can put inside that pipe, like what we do or what other companies do, whether it's hardware, my device, you see these plume pods and all these things that you can put in your home now. That amplifies, makes the 5G even better. So I think that's what I see. The bundles of operators bringing other technology, software or hardware to play and making it good for whatever you're doing. And gaming obviously is a big thing. So that's the game bundles are interesting.
Tim, do you want to chime in on that too? I mean, with the work you're doing at Next League, how are you working with vendors in this space? I mean, is a lot of your work raising awareness, as Indra was asking, and just sort of making them aware of what the capabilities are? Or I don't want to,
I would say it more stresses the system than makes them aware. I think most of the people that we work with along the way are aware, but they might not have pushed the system to the level that we would want. And so when we think of a venue and doing something for your mobile phone in that venue, the first thing is acquisition. So let's just use video. We're acquiring that at the venue. Then we're transporting it from that venue offsite somewhere. It used to be that for speed, you'd do it on site. You don't need to do that anymore. And then in that offsite, you're encoding. And then in encoding, even in low latency, under 1 second, you're still putting it on a CDN to handle the burst of it, the scale of it, and then sending it all back. Every one of those steps has a chance to be the worst part of the route. And so when you do it, you're coordinating groups that don't always work together with this same mission. They know they can connect together, but if they knew that they're connecting together for low latency, high bandwidth, dense network, all of that, then everybody has to work in sync. And so hiring someone like us is coordinating people that have all the capabilities, but maybe not do it in concert as much. And so I don't think they don't know about it, but to what Darcy was saying, by default, it might not be set the way that you'd like. Pardon me.
Be beautiful if they all worked on some standard together, wouldn't it? It's taken still 32 years later. I'm waiting for that.
Kenny, we have a couple more questions here, so actually they're starting to come in here. Do you want to chime in on that, Kenny, before I move on to some more
Yeah,
feedback that we're getting?
I don't know that I have too much to add because I don't really work at the, the hardware layer or anything. It's usually at the end user experience. I don't know if I have anything really good to add on that.
Fair enough. Ivan asks, how does 5G affect data security and privacy for sports streaming, specifically in contexts involving real-time betting and data sharing across devices? Does anyone want to talk about data security and privacy, or is that is that is that even a concern? Tim, I mean, I think you're, and Darcy too. Like, I think you've had a lot of experience in that sort of just allaying any fears of stakeholders involved with these experiences. Is that a real concern?
Well, look, it is a concern, and the technology doesn't just fix it by itself. But there are slices. So the channel for video and the channel for data are going to be different, period. You're not going to run them in the same one together. You still want a video experience, even if they can't get that low latency bet going on, or vice versa. So you got to make decisions as an operator, or the application itself, what channels to use where. So I think you got to lock down that at one channel because it's money versus just a broadcast of the actual event or whatever you're watching, and that's entirely possible. The technology is inherently sliceable. It's you can put different things in different channels of the bandwidth and lock them down, and the technology does support that. So I'd say it's way easier than it used to be. You had everything in one pipe. You had to figure out at the production level, you get DRM and all this other stuff you had to layer on. As soon as you do that, back to more latency. DRM was the worst. I mean, encryption that takes care of the bandwidth, and if it affects your visual, that's not good. So you got to run them in different channels. And like I said, that new 5G slicing capability that you have now that you never used to have in 4G does a lot to go down that road. But you still have to think about it, figure out which channel, what's going in where. So sorry for the long conversation, but that's what's going on.
I think that was perfect. And Ivan, if you have any follow-ups to that, please go ahead and submit them. There is a Q&A pod here in Zoom if you're not aware. So if you're watching and you have more questions that you want to ask, please go ahead and type them in. If Tim, did you want to chime in on
It looked
that?
like Kenny was going to jump in.
No, I was just gonna kind of back that up. Is I think that if you're worried about security in terms of like sports betting or something like that, I mean, I think that data is going to be completely out of band. Like that's not going to be coupled to the video stream or anything like that. And it's going to be secured in ways, that any other like data transaction is going to be. And because of that too, it can be faster and more secure. So like tying it to like video, I mean, that's kind of like it's a non-starter. So
Yeah, I don't know how much of a tech, sort of stack we want to get into there, but even with a technology like WebRTC, which can have a dedicated data channel separate from video, I mean, are we talking completely separate channels where you're using a different technology just to deliver the data separate from the video? Or when we're talking about the separation of data versus the actual video data, what do we mean there?
yeah, I mean, it could be a completely different like, data stream, completely different like means because, in that sense, like you don't have to worry about it kind of being choked out by the video. And in addition, like, because it's living on its own and everything, you can secure it and run it through that like means. And so you're like, I think, like in terms of doing that kind of process, like running it completely on its own allows you to completely focus in on that stream of data and that security and like whatever transaction layer that is. So I mean, it's like a focus of concerns, if you will.
There's
If that makes any sense.
There's another problem, whether it's outcome betting or whether it's in-game betting. So outcome is, who cares about latency? I made a bet before the game and I'm going to watch what the score is in what's the next play or what's going to happen in a play or, on a track. That is a different thing. So some of that you can use different technology, some you can't, but you have to start thinking about what you're actually allowing people to bet on as well before you decide on what technology, inbound, out of band, in video is in play.
Yeah, and even in that case, like if you had a low latency video solution and stuff, and you're trying to do very quick, like micro betting or something like that, then you probably, even in a micro betting situation, like the time sync is going to be very hard. And so it's almost like it becomes like a timing thing. And so it's less of a technology thing and more of a, like, like a timing of when you're going to do the bets against it. So that way you're kind of compensating for, possible delay of the video with a faster data stream and things like that. So it's a dance that you do around the technology, I guess.
Well, we did bidding. So I came from an auction company before this.
Yeah.
That was worse than everything because you have a vehicle on stage for X amount of seconds or minutes. It's all real time and it's constant, and there's thousands of people trying to get that vehicle. That is, I saw all the worst things that could possibly happen in that scenario. So yes, you got to figure it out. I mean, and you also have venues that don't have the same carrier or that have same connectivity, the consistency. If you're an NFL, hopefully the league takes care of some things, works on it with the teams, and it's more consistency standards. We go back to that. In that business where you're moving around and you don't know the venue or the what's going on, it's all bets are off because every venue has a different carrier and a different rules and different costs, and it's pretty. 5G does equalize the technology you're using, but not necessarily the capacity you have available during that event.
Curious, a side question to you, like in that auction situation, were they using like an internal infrastructure for that, or were they relying on just a normal open network?
No, we built a purpose-built network for the actual bid versus versus viewing. We had to compromise. The bidding was more important than the viewing. Now it all came together, but that was secondary, was the actual stream of the video. First priority was making sure the bid got in. And if you're bidding on a car, it's not like it got on the stage and you're suddenly bidding. You did your homework. So what you're doing is actually, that's all that matters. I want to win that thing. And I need to beat everybody. And so we've normalized everybody to the same speed. Nobody got an advantage. They couldn't get in there before the next person, and the bid goes on. So it worked well, but there was a lot of stuff we had to fix at lots of different venues. It was more about the changes between venues than it was about fixing the problem. We fixed the problem, and then it was a different problem when we got somewhere else. So that's the problem with that business. And you don't have a league. You just have to go and rent a facility and hope that somebody's got good bandwidth there when you get there.
We actually have a question specifically for Tim here in the question and answer. And Tim, if you can, I think you have access to the Q&A pod just like I do, but you may have seen it already from Eric here. Besides some of the mentioned examples, such as predictive interactive experiences, multi-camera video or replays, especially for arena sports like hockey and basketball, what other creative uses are being developed? Seems like the same concepts have been floating around for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of the same concepts are floating around. One of the things that is holding up some of the concepts is, if you're talking about NFL, NBA, NHL, or NASCAR, or any of the ones that have very lucrative broadcast rights, if you're trying to do something with the broadcast, they have different rights for at home and different rights for in the venue. And so it changes things up. And so one of the things that would be a fun unlock that I think people would enjoy is, I'm at the game, and Robert, right now, what I'll do is take a selfie and post it, and you can see it. And now we get to enjoy that. And now we're texting with each other, which is a little awkward for me at the venue, et cetera. But if there's ways for us to do a real-time interaction while I'm at the venue, that's great. The hard part is, what I get to see in real time, you get 45 seconds later at home. And if I did something in real time with what I have access to video, you don't have the permissions from contract-wise to do it. So those are some of the things that'll slow some of the more creative ideas. And I think the more creative ideas are connecting the bragging rights of like, I'm at the venue and I want you to be able to enjoy some of that with me. You're not here with me, but I'm going to bring you a little bit closer. To do that, you got to get past a couple contracts.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that question, even though it was directed at Tim there? Well, let's move on. We've got lots of time still, but I want to go back to the questions that were in the session. Um, that one question was a three-parter. Where is 5G making a splash? Where are the untapped opportunities? How can stakeholders strategically leverage those quote-unquote untapped opportunities? Did anyone want to chime in more about what stakeholders can do to more strategically leverage any opportunities in 5G? I mean, we've talked about it here and there, but and our very last question, of course, is the roadblocks question. So we can migrate over there too. But let's like talk about stakeholders. Tim, I'm going to pick on you again, all of you actually, because I think you have unique takes on it. But Tim, do you want to just talk at Next League? Who are the various stakeholders that you're working with, and again, where are you educating them more on some stakeholders more on where the strategic advantages might be in this area?
Yeah, like I was highlighting before, the first thing you have to do is figure out where your guardrails are. What can you and can't you do? And that almost always involves the contracts. And the biggest contract of all is the broadcast contract. So when you get past that, now you have an understanding of where you can be creative. And the more you understand the nuance of it, that broadcast contract might only be domestic and international has a different rule, or there might be something that you could do in venue as long as it stays in venue. So you geograde it and things like that. And so what I would say is creativity first starts with knowing where the guardrails is. It's not of anybody's advantage to go in and just be creative for creative's sake. Because you'll get far and then someone will find out that it's not possible. And so the first thing that we do is get smart on what their contracts can do. And then that helps the stakeholders know what's possible. And then when that's there, the nice thing is, I think everybody on this panel is continuously saying the technology has lots of capability. There used to be a time where you might say, oh, I can't do that because the technology is the bottleneck. People have invested a tremendous amount in the piping. People have invested a tremendous amount in the venues. I understand that Darcy said some of them that are not the same, or some of them are very large. So a 4-mile track, that sort of thing. Like there's some that are a little more complicated, but for sports in general, they've spent the investment for you to be creative. And really the biggest hindrance is just where you sold your rights. I don't know if that's a kickoff for it. We can keep on following up with more, but that's where I would start.
I'm going to take a little contrarian view because I'm not talking about venues. I'm talking about esports for a second. So competitive gaming, that's the problem we solve. And after the pandemic, it went from LAN events where you can control the situation in a venue like you can in normal sports to people participating from anywhere in the world in this thing. The difference between esports or competitive gaming and sports is the players are the fans and the fans are the players. They all participate, and it's really, intense to figure out, what to give bandwidth. If you're playing and you're involved in a tournament and you're a player, you're going to need something different than the person watching on Twitch. So, but the person watching on Twitch could suddenly be a player. So you got to really figure out, the dynamics. So the publishers of these games or the organizers of these events are the stakeholders, and they can't have a bad experience. The sponsors are there paying money, and you've got all these factors. Well, what do I do if there's people from 4 different countries playing in a sim racing experience or playing League of Legends? You got to you actually think about normalizing. Latency is still there, but you got to put everybody at the same level because you can't have competitive advantages. I'm closer to the publisher's server, so I'm going to win because I got less latency. No, you got to actually put latency into it. So that person, everybody's got the same latency. So now it's back to skills, not I got a better position. I moved my team over to LA close to Riot Games servers, and I'm going to beat everybody because of that advantage. That's like steroids. And now that gaming, competitive gaming and esports is sanctioned by the IOC and World Cup, FIFA, they're going to start seeing a lot more of this standardization and requirements like there is in any sport. But the genie's out of the bottle from remote players. That used to be they all got together in a LAN and that was okay, but you can't do that anymore. People are going to play with each other from anywhere in the world. There's always going to be money or cred on the line, and the operators have to kind of get together. Well, that's not, we mentioned earlier getting together. Tim said it. They haven't gotten together for 32 years, so I'm not going to trust them. That's why we built the technology with this company. It's an overlay network. It looks at all the data streams and all the video, and we take care of the session. Gaming's cool because it all exists in a server, so cameras and all that, that's just virtual stuff. But the actual connectivity between the person playing the game and the other person playing the game and the server is really critical. 5G improved a lot because now you can play from pretty much anywhere, and that first mile is not as bad. We actually map network slices and middle mile priorities, so we can actually create a data stream for the gameplay, which is, when you're playing a game, most of it's in the server. Your local is just your character moving around in your computer, but it has to coordinate with the other characters. Otherwise, it's a crappy game to watch. Whether you're watching sim racing at 100 milliseconds and one guy's got 1,000 milliseconds, that's a crash fest. In a first-person shooter game, you're dead before you even walk into the venue. So that's all stuff you got to fix. And I think back to some standards got to exist. And if it's an overlay network like we built and others are doing, that's fine. But we're going to see a lot more of that participation from, I want to be in the game. I want to chat with my friends. It doesn't have to be playing it. Just like you said, they're all fans. So how do I can't be if you have a better advantage and you can see the play before me, I'm a phoning my guy and saying, hey, I have a crappy connection. This sucks. And so the operators need to learn. The operators have to come together and figure this out, and they haven't done it yet. And, they haven't also worked with the encoding companies or the DRM companies or whatever. We have these forums called NAB and IBC and places they meet. Like, get your act together. It's not hard. We all can fix it at the edge. So why can't you fix it in the core? I'm speaking to the choir on this panel, but out there in the real world, it's a mishmash. And so you got to do some overlay, whether it's done at the production level or at the network level, that gives you that close to standard as you can get.
I'm glad that Darcy brought up e-gaming and sim racing, et cetera. And this question was largely in many ways about creativity and what's next. I'm gonna go on the positive side here and say, during the pandemic, NASCAR, one of our clients, was very creative, and they put their actual drivers into sims and broadcast them playing, call it a video game. And that was a crossover that we hadn't really seen before. Another one of our clients, TGL, is starting it's a new golf league that'll start in January. They're going to have the top names in golf playing indoor at night, and the first shot or second shot is going to be into a movie theater size screen. So you're going to have Tiger Woods playing a simulated golf, turn around, and then there's a turf, call it 35 yards or something like that, with a hole that rotates and actuates to form different. That blending of traditional gaming and virtual or sim is getting closer and closer in what we're seeing. And that will produce some pretty creative ideas for Kenny and others to create software to make people feel like they're involved in it.
Kenny, do you have anything you want to add into that mix?
I'm trying to use my brain over here to see if I can come up with anything.
Hey, no pressure. I
Yeah.
just didn't want. I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak since we're not all in person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of hard. Like, I keep thinking, like in the context of like 5G, since that's the topic and everything, and like a lot of the experiences and everything, you are that are talked about a little bit are stuff you could do in the house. I mean, I think the in stadium stuff, or the places where you're mobile and trying to think about like what those experiences might be, or like what you can enhance there, are the things that I'd look at. Like, what are the new scenarios or the places where you could take advantage of having connectivity like out there in the wild. I think I mentioned to you, one of the ones that I foresee in the future is and this is again kind of going off a topic a little bit, but is like autonomous cars. At some point, like with 5G, if you think about 5G in the perspective of what it enables like connectivity between devices and everything else. And if you think about a car, basically a car can connect to every other car that's on the road, and they can talk to each other and then determine where they are. So there's basically no traffic anymore. And that will prevent collisions and everything else. And so at that point, if you have that, you're in the car, you're sitting around, it becomes an entertainment vehicle, and so at that point, like, what does that experience look like? And it's going to be different from, me traveling to school with the kids versus, me like getting dropped off at a venue from the airport or whatever, because what my experience and what I'm trying to, understand is I'm coming into a new city versus my daily commute will be a different entertainment experience. So, I mean, that's one thing that I'm kind of like looking at that'll probably be shot down because it won't ever happen, even though I think maybe it will, So, but I don't know, like a lot of the stuff that Tim's talking about, like in stadium stuff, I mean, it's got me thinking too, like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of perspectives that I've thought about in the past, but, the more I think about it, it's like, well, yeah, those like, you just have to get in the mindset of the end user and like, what do they want? What's going to be advantageous that adds to the thing that they'll actually use, So I don't know. Complete ramble there. Hopefully it's hopefully it's helpful.
Hey, this is an open conversation. This is great.
That's what we just said. 5G, everybody can be part of experience. That never used to happen. You get out of your house and you were disconnected.
Yeah.
Now you're always there, whether you're in your car or whatever you're doing. So I think that's the back channel side. I'm a participant. When you're in e-gaming or you're in a car, you're not just, consuming, you're actually contributing. And all the other things in that network, whether you're playing games with other people that are on fixed wireless or mobile, it all has to come together. So that's the challenge, and it's happening already. I'll use sim racing real fast again. There was never a time till now where I could sit and race against, in my simulator, it's over there, against somebody who was on a real track racing at the exact same time. It's possible now. The latency's gotten so, tight, and that 5G lets me do it because it's at the track. That's what they're using. So yeah, it's made a little delayed because everybody has to normalize and all those other factors we talked about. But the fact that I can sit there in a simulator and race against the guy who's on the track at, NASCAR race or Formula One race or drag racing, it's amazing. Just think about the possibilities when you can be in it. That golf experience, same thing. I mean, that's even better because golf's a little slow. So, I can be at home on the fairway with Tiger Woods and playing that same game that he's playing. In fact, maybe be even in the same foursome or behind him, whatever it is. That is changing the fan experience forever. And 5G lets you do it from anywhere. I think it's amazing that you can do that today.
Thank you. This is all. I'm just catching up with questions here because we're getting quite a few here now as we enter our last 10 minutes. We do have we've talked a bit about roadblocks already, but if anyone wants to chime in on just what they're like, I think overarching with all of you in the conversation, it doesn't seem like 5G as a technology is the roadblock itself, right? It's been here, it's only getting better, and so what does anyone want to comment on just what they see as the roadblocks as we head into 2025 and how much longer they're going to be roadblocks?
Standards. I'm just quickly standards.
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question about ATSC and other stuff. You mentioned WebRTC. I mean, there's still a lot of fractured and fragmented things. It doesn't mean you can't all come together, but there is still no common standards that are going to let this just happen. And again, we're fixing one problem, putting slicing against prioritization in the middle mile and lining those two so that packet can go through without any friction. That takes care of a lot. So now what's next? Well, do you standardize it so everybody can be time synced and play in the same time? Sure. Watching a game or participating in a game, you cannot have a disconnect. Social media will challenge everything because if you saw it before somebody else, that's going to blow up everything, especially in betting. I mean, that's just off the table. You can't have that happen. So I think we got to get to standards. And I think that's still a roadblock, but it's also an opportunity.
I'm
And
going to spin it on
since
the
you, oh, go
opportunity
ahead.
side and say, like, you're leading in and creating opportunities for people because they could leverage the work that you've done. Phoenix real-time streaming is a company that we've used in the past for low latency streaming, and they've made a lot of that easier. So while it's not a standard, using them saves a lot of time. And so for wherever there's not standards, there's solutions. So I'm gonna challenge the audience on that. We're saying it and saying it's up to your creativity. Like there really shouldn't be something that the technology is the main hurdle on it. It might take a lot of effort, it might take coordination, totally get that, but you can be as creative as you want right now.
And I wanted to just ask, and anyone can answer this, but Darcy, since you've been bringing up the standards banner, how long do you think we're going to be in this position where we don't really have enough standards in place? Again, we've got some protocol standards in play right now, but we don't really have a whole lot of coordinated stacks that are standardized. I mean, because that's what I'm seeing you're talking about, right? Because there's so many things to take into consideration there. Sure, we've got certain things that are standards already, but and have been adopted by browsers, just as an example. But how far off are we from this promised land of standards that are going to be required for 5G and these experiences we're talking about? I mean, do you think it's going to be a year, 5 years? Like, where do you think we're at with that?
I don't know, 6G is coming already, so I'm thinking never. There'll be more than one standard. I don't think we'll ever see a single standard. For ATSC, how does that going to come together with 5G broadcast? Who knows? They're competing. They're competing for different reasons, and so I think there's a few standards that'll happen for sure, and they're already there. It's the adoption of the standards. For maybe industries need to just find their standard. The sports industry should find something. The people building venues or putting networks into venues need to standardize that, so I can walk in there and plug my master control in and have a great experience. WebRTC tried it, and it got a long way, but there's competing standards there too. So, mention Phoenix and other technologies like we have. I mean, we do what we do for a reason, because they don't exist. So I guess at some level, I'm glad there are any standards, because that's why we're here, to fix that problem. But ultimately, I don't see a single standard emerging. And before it does, you're going to have 6G. AI is killing everything, because the amount of capacity we need just to support the amount of generated content that's out there is killing other things. So they're trying to fix that problem now instead of fixing the standard problem, actually, in my opinion. So.
Well, and I wanted to bring up another roadblock. I think, Darcy, you might have been on a panel we were on together where it might have come up. But are the payment models, especially when it comes to micro betting, is that any kind of roadblock to just sort of adoption? And when we're talking about micro betting specifically, and credit card transaction fees, for example, is that? I mean, and Tim, I don't know if that's something you've had to deal with when it comes to any even prototype experiences you put together or not, but are payment models a factor here at all? Or, when it comes to adoption of these, again, we have these tech stacks that can be adopted now, but are there other things that aren't tech related, like payment models, that are affecting the adoption of these technologies?
What I see in it is the things that we get to prototype or bring to market for experiences are usually given to us by the league, and they have full rights to video and able to do things with it. The betting organizations don't always have that. And so it's not about, can you sync the video with the payment and have a single experience that does that. Oftentimes they price themselves out. And so you'll often see a betting experience that is independent, a second screen, to a video experience or a live experience, however you want to do that. And some people see that as a hurdle, like, why don't I have the two together? The cost to put the two together is pretty significant in a lot of cases. And so I think for a while, you'll still see a second screen, which alleviates a sync problem, but it's probably, once again, it's more contracts, but it shouldn't stop people from being creative. So I want to finish on the positive and not on the roadblocks and say, right, don't let technology be your hurdle. Be really creative out there. There's a lot to do.
And we are getting to that point where we're closing things up here as we come down to our last 4 minutes. We did have 2 thumbs up on a question from Jim about referencing resources that any of you would recommend for live sports streaming. So if any, I think if maybe there's any kind of follow-up, maybe we can do with streaming media afterwards to, put together some links and resources. But if any of you want to quickly mention anything as a reference or as a resource for anyone watching that has helped you with understanding anything we're talking about, please mention it now.
This forum and sports video group, sorry to give them a plug, but
No.
that's who I follow. All the people that matter are in those forums. So one is broadcast related, one is, streaming related, but they've converged. Different reasons to be members. They have different purposes. Find an organization to be part of and be serious in that organization, learning and participating. And those kind of things will just naturally be there. There's resources like crazy in this space to learn from. They're overwhelming actually. So being a part of an organization helps you to kind of wade through the quagmire of stuff we just talked about.
That's a better answer than what I was probably going to do in plugging some logos, because I don't know what it is you're trying to do. And so if I don't know what it is you're trying to do, I don't want to say there's one answer for anything that you want. And so I think Darcy's answer is essentially network, like get connected with other people who have done some of this before, and my experience is people will share that, those references. For us to do it just blanketly, it might not apply.
Well, we are down to our last 2 minutes here. I don't know if anyone wants to give a quick 30-second closing on their thoughts here, but I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I know we didn't get to every question. We had a question about how AI is making a difference now or in the future. If anyone wants to chime in real quickly, you can see the same questions that are still open, but I do want to start wrapping it up so we don't bleed into another session here.
I'd love to say
Steve,
something about AI.
Yep. Oh, go for it.
Since I'm heavy in it.
Make it quick.
Two things. It is creating more content than we ever imagined. And we have to contend with the volumes of content now that were never thought before. Literally, generative AI is, 1000x of content that used to be there a couple of years ago. So that's the problem. The opportunity is you can use AI to do routing and fix problems, and it can actually predict, traffic and all the things in the network. That's our whole network's built off AI. It makes predictive analysis on the fly and changes its shape all, on the fly, real time, constantly, with 3 billion gamers around the world, hitting these servers. So AI is my best friend. It's also an enemy for the network. So both ways works, but you got to use it. If you aren't using AI in your solutions these days, machine learning, I call it, forget AI. You need to be in it. You need to learn it, and that's an important part of anything you're going to do in this space. Make sure you're learning that angle.
I'll say mine more loosely. Kenny, you brought up autonomous cars. We have them here in Santa Monica. I've taken a ride in one of them. It is a huge leap. And so be creative. Don't try to be incremental. Make big leaps in what you're doing, and push the limits.
Well,
Anything
I think
you want to add?
yeah. Oh no. Well, Kenny, if you can have a last snippet there if you want, or we can just close it on.
Go out there and have fun. It's a fun space. It's not dead yet. The army of AI content has started, but it hasn't taken over. It probably will, but until that point, let's go out there and make cool stuff.
Well, thank you all for participating. I've had this has been actually better than I thought this was going to be. Well, I've just been on a couple of these panels before, and this has been a really, I think there's been a lot of great back and forth here. Steve, do you want to take us away here?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to thank you all so much. Thanks for a great conversation. It's always nice when we have a panel that just goes way beyond what the description suggested. I think that was great stuff. So thanks, Tim. Thanks, Darcy. Thanks, Kenny. As always, thanks, Rob. Before we go here, we have a winner to announce. The walk-up music that you heard coming in was Chump Change by the late great Quincy Jones, and a lot of people guessed it, but the first one to get it, or a lot of people recognized it, but the first one to get it was Paul Fileo. So congratulations, Paul. You will get something in your email inbox about your $50 gift card. That'll be coming to you soon. And join us right back here at 2:30 Eastern time for our next session, which goes right off of this one, also about sports streaming game plan, monetizing live sports streaming. So we hope we'll see you for that. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you.